This is just the state of college football. Any team we pick, any team we talk to, any team we address and review in terms of personnel changes, coaching changes, there's a lot going on in college football. The transfer portal is stuffed. I've heard the number 1,400 thrown around. Recruiting going on as well. Of course, National Signing Day is past us, but we've got the second National Signing Day coming as well. So personnel changes, tons going on with every team. But those coaching transition teams, they are really humming with all sorts of overhaul, including, of course, at LSU. And we got Carter the Power, the Power Hour LSU YouTube channel. Got our guy Carter right here to talk some LSU football. Carter, it's been a long time. Appreciate you being here.
Let's go.
Yeah, you're ready to go here.
Yeah. It's interesting, Mark. Like, I care about all of college football, right? As much as I love LSU and getting to do what I do for, a full-time job now, and that, YouTube's just an amazing platform for college football fans. And I see your viewers interact with you really well. And I think we're watching something at LSU right now for the first time amongst the college football blue bloods, which is a complete overhaul of a roster through the transfer portal, right? So we've seen Alabama and Georgia pick up huge transfers, right? So, Georgia probably doesn't win that game if they don't get Darian Kendrick before the season. And Alabama doesn't get to where they get without Henry To'oTo'o and, more notably, Javis Williams, right? But those are just a few pieces, right? And LSU in the past has had a few transfers step up in a few spots. But this is the first time one of the 5 or 10 best programs in college football is pulling a Mel Tucker here, right? Where Michigan State just completely overhauled their roster, led by Kenneth Walker with the transfer portal. This is the first time that we're seeing this with one of the best. And right now, LSU has as many transfer portal players, or almost as many transfer portal players in this recruiting class as they do actual high school recruits. And Mark, I know you love all the fascinating angles that the transfer portal has brought college football. We're seeing this for the first time with one of the best. And I think it's going to help Brian Kelly turn this thing around in year one.
We encourage everybody to head on over to Carter the Power, the LSU channel that Carter's got here, Power Hour LSU. So look it up in any way, fashion. Get Carter in the title, get Power in the title, and I think you're going to be able to find him right here on YouTube. All right, man. Let's look at this, because I tuned into the Texas Bowl and I'm like, wow, 38 scholarship players on this team. Wow, this is a skeleton of a team right here. This is not the LSU team that is loaded with talent, and even though they've had 2 consecutive disappointing seasons, could pull off a game like they did against Alabama or Florida and jump up, and because they've got that kind of talent. You went from, for example, having the best tandem of cornerbacks in college football heading into 21 to where are the scholarship cornerbacks? We don't have any. There's a couple guys running around, and that's all we've got. So I was trying to decipher, watching the game, listening to the game. Okay, who's going to be back? Who's going to be impactful? Who doesn't really matter because they're probably headed out the door, or they're buried on the depth chart, and they just need players out there, so they're getting their shot tonight. You mentioned the offensive line. So let's start there in terms of NFL departures. We just passed a date where early entries could make their declaration to the NFL draft January 17th. So where does this offensive line stand? Who are the candidates to fill in and make this thing go in 22?
Yeah, so, it's kind of hard to really fathom this, but LSU is going to have to replace 4 two-year starters on the offensive line. Now, the positive side of it is that LSU's offensive line has been mostly meh these last 2 years. Obviously, in 2020, they weren't really good. At the end of 2021, their new offensive line coach, Brad Davis, did a better job with the group. And they lose Ed Ingram, who was a big contributor to the 2019 team. And then they also lose Austin Deculus. So, going back to the transfer portal, it's where LSU has really been killing it, led by Miles Frazier of Florida International. They also picked up a really solid offensive lineman from ETSU, and I don't think they're done there. I think they're going to look for more playing time coming out of the portal. And look, they had some players step in and play some snaps last year, Mark, that were okay. But I don't know if they are the answer to be full-time starters on the offensive line. And as you know, you can't win a national championship just with 5 offensive linemen. You need 7, 8, 9 of them. And this is where it gets fascinating, Mark. I'm looking at all the viewers right now. This is where it gets really interesting, is that Louisiana, for the most part, all right, so you see all these great players in the NFL, right? You see Jordan Jefferson and Jamar Chase and all the great defensive players like Devin White and Tyrann Mathieu. But what's interesting is out of all the positions, offensive line has been the one where the numbers aren't quite like the others. And that's in large part due to in-state offensive linemen that Louisiana produced haven't really been all that great. Now, there's been some, but it hasn't been as good as the other positions, right? So this is where recruiting becomes a big deal. Georgia's starting center was a guy by the name of Cedric Van Pran, who was a top 100 player coming out of New Orleans, and he was really good. There's no other way around it. He was really good. So in this cycle, Mark, LSU had not 1, but 2 elite 4-star offensive linemen. That is Emory Jones out of Catholic High in Baton Rouge and Will Campbell, who's a North Louisiana Tiger. Those guys were both top 250 guys. I even see Emory Jones being very underrated. I think he's the best player in the class of 2022. I think he's so severely underrated. Those 2 guys could obviously help out and play right away next year, but I don't think Brian Kelly's really going to want that in year 1, playing so many true freshmen.
Got Carter here. Check out his YouTube channel. It's you see the enthusiasm, the knowledge. It's obvious right here. So you got to check out what's going on Power Hour LSU right here on YouTube. So when we switch to the defense, you know, if you go back to 2019, this is a defense that developed throughout the season, that took its knocks as, okay, this is just an offensive show, and they're going to carry them to a national championship. But it turned out to be a legit top 10 type defense down the home stretch. Your thoughts in looking at, you know, you mentioned linebackers to me in regards to having to overhaul the linebacking position to a certain extent. You know, who are we looking for in 22 at linebacker?
Yeah, so, you know, we were talking about the transfer portal earlier. LSU's also had some fringe NFL draft guys come back. So they get Jay Ward back, a really solid member of the secondary. I think he was playing out of position last year. They also get Dre Jenkins back, a good contributor at wide receiver. But I think the biggest name that they get back is Micah Baskerville, who is a very experienced player, another North Louisiana Tiger, who is going to undoubtedly be the leader of that linebacker core. So the key now is finding the other guy. They bring in Wes Weeks, a Virginia transfer. They obviously have some other talented players, Greg Penn being one of them. But this is, once again, something that gets very interesting, right? So the defensive line looks fine up to this point. But we first need to see, Mark, what Matt House is going to do. So he is the new LSU defensive coordinator, and he has not been a defensive coordinator since 2018, where he was at Kentucky. Now, what's really interesting, Mark, is, once again, you're a diehard college football fan. You probably remember that 2018 Kentucky defense. They were really good. They had Josh Allen, 2 other draft picks in the top 3 rounds as well that are still in the NFL in the secondary. So it comes down to what kind of defense does Matt House want to run? How different is this defense going to look after spending time in the NFL for 3 years as just a position coach? So, you know, he's also going to be the linebackers coach. It's going to come down to, does he want to run a 3-3-5? Does he want to run a 3-4 and have BJ Ojulari play that Josh Allen outside linebacker role? And that's going to be key in how this defense is going to look.
Yeah, Mike Edwards comes to mind off that Kentucky team in 2018. He's making plays in the NFL. You see him in the NFL playoffs right now making plays. Yeah, Kentucky could play defense in 2018 for sure. 10-3, top 10 team. All right, DBU. You know what I would love to do sometime, Carter? I would love to bring you on here because you know your stuff. Other people that really know their stuff that can debate, that know their stuff and can take it toe to toe, like a Florida rep, an Ohio State rep.
Yeah.
You know, the various schools that would have a legit claim to DBU. LSU certainly at or near the top of the list, depending on your perspective. But Derek Stingley's gone. He is declared for the NFL draft. Eli Ricks, of course, has made his transfer move to Alabama in division. Ouch, that hurts. I heard the statistic that LSU went to the field with 2 scholarship cornerbacks against Kansas State. So to be DBU currently 2022, how does that look?
Yeah. So let me just say this, and I know a lot of LSU fans are going to get mad at me. Let's hope we hold on to that DBU title going into next year, right? So, look, LSU has had the most legendary defensive backs of this modern era play at their university, and they are unquestionably DBU. Now, I understand a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's just an LSU fan just saying that. No, it's just true. LSU is DBU, right? Alabama's had great defensive backs. Florida's had great defensive backs. As a Saints fan as well, I know Ohio State's had great defensive backs, right? But LSU is DBU, all right? A guy who hasn't really played in 2 years is still going to be a top 10 pick. So it is unquestionably true that LSU is DBU. However,
I think it's a debate, but go ahead, Carter.
No, it can be, right? But to objectively look at LSU secondary right now and think you feel unbelievably confident about the secondary as we've been basically every year. This is the first year where you are really shivering your timbers looking at the LSU secondary, right? Now, here's the good news is that once again, the transfer portal has helped out. They bring in Greg Brooks, Joe Big Play Fuchsia, both out of Arkansas, both Louisiana prospects. Then, of course, you bring in Mekhi Williams-Gardner out of UL. So that obviously helps out. Now, how does LSU look at the safety room? That's going to be key as well. Do they want to move Jay Ward from safety, who, quite frankly, wasn't really that good at safety last year? And then, of course, you have some guys that are backups that are really talented, but just can't stay healthy. And obviously the biggest name there is former 5-star Sage Ryan. So that's what's going to be key. How they view who plays where is going to be very interesting. And the second thing, Mark, is, and you see it throughout college football, because of these spread offenses and because these defensive backs have to play so many snaps, you do see, and once again, I don't have quantitative data that backs this up, but I can tell you just from watching LSU the past couple of years, there have been a lot of injuries on the secondary, right? So you not only need to have 5 guys who can run and cover and play in space, it's kind of like the offensive line. You need 7, 8, 9 of those kinds of guys, and there's going to be a lot of those guys that need to step up going into next year.
You keep making a comment about the transfer portal. That keeps coming up because that is the theme of college football, and especially at LSU, that is going to fuel this team. It's become the free agency. It's a lot different than NFL free agency, but in regards to supplementing a roster where recruiting's still the core, but you need to use the transfer portal.